Are you guys ready to rock? As they say?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for coming out to this composers panel today. Before I introduce our panelists, let's dive right into the music. We'll get into introductions. Where is my remote control? Right here. No! This is a good start. Maybe we chant music.
Look! Hulk! Buddy! I know you really like smashing it.
Oh, smash!
Yeah, I got that. It's your thing. So you and I should work together because I like smashing too. Check this out.
Buttman smash wall next!
You know what? Let's work together and smash an energy man toward the water. You know, the river? That way?
Hulk can't be smashing energy man!
Oh, no, the other way, the river! Hulk, smash the other way! Let's go, MJ!
Oh no! I dropped my camera!
I got it!
You will not hurt my friends. There is nothing that will hold me back. I know who I am.
What's happening to him? Was he programmed to do that? I've never seen a robot do that. You mean Ninjoid? Yeah, it's whatever. Zane's unlocked his true potential. What happened?
That was awesome!
Within our lifetimes, we've marveled as biologists have managed to look at ever smaller and smaller things. The astronomers have looked further and further into the dark night sky, back in time and out in space. But maybe the most mysterious of all is neither the small nor the large. It's us, up close. Could we even recognize ourselves? And if we did, would we know ourselves? What would we say to ourselves? What would we learn from ourselves? What would we really like to see if we could stand outside ourselves and look at us?
has not the strength.
He may not have the strength. But does he have the will?
you go. Hi, I'm Matt Patches. I'm the movies editor of Hollywood.com. I'm very proud to get to speak to this slate of gentlemen today, talking about music, TV, movies, video games, all over the place. Everything needs music, and these guys are bringing it to life. Let me introduce our panelists today. First up, here on the end, we have Kevin Manthei. By the way, I've stalked you on the internet, so hopefully I got your bios right here. Kevin is a graduate of USC's scoring for motion pictures and television, where he studied with the people like Jerry Goldsmith, among others. He moved on to provide additional music for Marco Beltrami on movies like Scream 3, Resident Evil, and before taking full composer duties on shows like Invader Zim, DC animated films like Justice League New Frontier and Batman Gotham Knights, and video games like Star Trek Online and Tron Evolution. And now he's currently writing music for a cartoon we saw up here called Ultimate Spider-Man. And then we have Dino Meneghin. And before entering the world of composing, Dino began as a guitarist, playing for a few familiar groups you may have heard of, including Destiny's Child, Josh Groban, Liz Phair, and Michael Bublé. And his time touring led him to score a number of commercials before eventually taking on the role of a music producer for the MTV show Taking the Stage. And he is now the composer of the network's acclaimed show Teen Wolf. Will Bates. Will is one half of the award-winning music company Fall on Your Sword, which he started with Bill Mossman in 2009. For their work in commercials, the group has received a Ken Gold Lion and 2 CeeLo Awards for their work in advertising. And their work also led them to compose music for an outstanding Sundance hit, Another Earth, and the indie drama Nobody Walks, which is out now in theaters. So you should see that. And next is Frederik Wiedmann. Frederik is a Berklee College of Music grad who worked with John Frizzell, a composer of Alien Resurrection and Office Space, as an orchestrator, score mixer, arranger, programmer, everything, apparently. And Wiedmann has composed, he moved on and composed for a number of indie dramas, horror movies, and TV shows, and now he is scoring up a storm, I might add, on Green Lantern, the animated series. And then we have Jay Vincent. Jay is a graduate of the USC film scoring program as well, and has gathered an eclectic number of credits that have seen him dabbling in every world music you could possibly imagine. In the year 2012, he composed original music for the Golden Globe Awards, and has a #1 television series, Lego Ninjago, and received a BMI Film and TV Award. His work can also be heard in Dragon Age 2 and Mass Effect 3. Now that I've given the brief rundown of your lives, I'm really curious about how each of you kind of entered the world of composing. Some of you trained in college to become composers, some of you kind of fell into it, it seems. So if anyone wants to kick off, I'm really just curious how you landed this first project. Jay, do you want to just start?
Landed this first project?
Or your first big composing gig. I mean, you went to college, you wanted to do this all your life. What was the first kind of break into the industry? It seems kind of difficult.
Well, it's interesting because I actually did not want to do this. You guys all right?
Yeah, here.
Yes, sir? I actually did not want to do this my whole life. I mean, when you're a kid, when you love something, you just want to do it all the time. So, I love music, and so I just dabbled in any kind of music I could get my hands on, mostly as a performer. And then when you kind of grow up and you want to kind of get a job and like be an adult, you're thinking, I want to have fun, I want to do what I love, but I also want to continually challenge myself. Because as we get older in life, we have this idea of progress. So I was thinking, well, what am I going to do if I just play all these different instruments and do all this kind of stuff? Like, how do I break in? How do I get a day job? And then I saw this movie called The Fellowship of the Ring when I was about 16. And all of a sudden, everything just kind of made sense. It's like, that's the ultimate challenge as a musician. Being a film composer. Even just being a classical composer, you're pretty much just in the classical genre. If you're in a band, you just make the same albums that your record company tells you most of the time. So a business like this, where every single project is different, and the demands of every project are different. You do a David Fincher film and it says, okay, do electronic. You do a superhero movie, it says, write a really strong theme. You do, something like Another Earth that says, give us something brand new we've never heard before. And so you have to be able to do it, otherwise you're fired. So I consider that the ultimate challenge as a musician is to do what we do. And so it's kind of, it's kind of masochistic, but it is the ultimate challenge, to do or die sort of thing. So I decided to just throw all my marbles into just the world of composing. And so yeah, I went to USC, did that whole thing, and the biggest thing there is, I took a lot of film classes at the USC Film School and aligned with a bunch of people that were coming into their own as filmmakers. And you do small projects for no money with your friends because you're passionate about it, and you really cut your teeth on things like that. And then everybody goes out into the world and they're working as an assistant for this person, there's an editor for this, or an FX supervisor for that, and everybody kind of rises, but if they had a great first experience with you in the trenches for no money, it's kind of like people who go to war together, they stay friends for life, because they always remember, like, who stuck by me when I had nothing. He was trusted with little, can be trusted with much, that whole sort of thing. So it really was just working with filmmakers in film school, and then 5 years later when they get something, they call you because they remember you.
Fred, what was your experience working under some of these well-known composers and really collaborating with them, and as Jay puts it, in the trenches, working in the trenches?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that was the ultimate school to learn the craft. I mean, college was great, and there was a lot of things that you are able to learn there too, but once you're actually working on big motion pictures, and you are the only assistant, which was the case of me. I was the only guy there, so I had to pretty much do anything around creating a score besides the composing, which is what John Frizzell was doing. So I would say to me, it was the absolute best school. I think I stayed there for 3 years, and I've done close to 25 scores, feature film scores with him in that time. He was really busy during those 3 years.
Did you learn something specific from him?
Well, I think I've learned the most important thing that I've learned there is how you deal with clients of these very big levels, these big studio executives, directors, and how do you
make it sound like Star Wars? That's what they say.
Yeah, well, and the delicacy of having 10 different opinions that all matter and trying to get those all combined into what you do. And I think that's one of the toughest things that I'm always trying to get better at, is how do you get everybody on the same page?
And Kevin, having also worked with some people in the beginning of your career, how do you finally step up and leave that world and have enough time and creativity to be like, I can finally do this and take on my own solo projects?
I got started working while I was working as I was mentoring sort of unofficially with Marco Beltrami on various projects, working sort of how he was working with John Frizzell. I was also starting to get some video game work on my own, and you basically do whatever you can to get work, which is you use what credits you have available to help quick credits, beget credits, and so on. So as I was working on like Scream 2, I was able to take that credit as writing additional music on a feature film, and talk to these game guys, and they're like, oh, okay, so it kind of gave me a little bit of panache that helped me get Vampire the Masquerade Redemption, I remember, because that was basically a vampire horror game, and I had just finished scoring a bunch of horror music for a big feature film. So we're kind of talking about how we get started, and anyone who's kind of interested in becoming a composer, what's great about, I think, wanting to become a composer is it's sort of that old-fashioned mentoring and journeymanship that seems to have been lost in society, but I think that's alive and well in some careers. I know game producers that started in the testing department way back when in Activision and rose up to become big executive producers. There are still places where you can start from the bottom and work as an assistant, as basically getting coffee turns into being an assistant, turns into doing a little bit of orchestration on something, which turns into writing music, which turns into a career. So. And
then for Will and Dino, I'm really curious about how you guys ended up breaking into composing and having been musicians previously, and decided to finally tackle it in that way? Is it just because the industry demands you to do it, or are people starting to look outside of the traditional composers to start working on their films and TV projects?
That's definitely true. But for me, I always wanted to do this. This was like the thing that I wanted to do since I was like 5 years old. I think I sang the entire score of Star Wars to my parents one morning at the age of 6 or 7, and aside from going out and buying me an Ewok outfit, they also bought me a violin and like kind of really encouraged me to get into it. And I actually sort of took a bit of a sidestep from that path after I basically decided I wanted to be a jazz musician and learned the saxophone, and then when I got into my early 20s discovered techno and started producing records and stuff. But I've rather naively thought that, and it sounds like you and I come from a similar background, but I rather naively thought that getting into commercials and scoring commercials would be like a route into film, which is not very smart. As it turns out, the two worlds exist very much sort of in parallel and don't really converge, I guess. So what I found was I was funding my sort of indie film career with the advertising stuff, so I would like write horrible bits of music for advertising things.
What commercial have we seen you working? Admit it.
Quite a lot of stuff, I hate to say. Everything from like Pampers to BMW. I have Coca-Cola spot out right now.
Hey, that's good.
That's all right. But some real stinkers as well. But some of the early films were very small budget movies, and doing the ads kind of really allowed me to sort of meet filmmakers and, you know, kind of fund the early films. Because I guess everyone starts out differently by the sounds of it, but for me it was really like doing a bunch of freebies especially in New York. I'm based in New York. The sort of indie film world was really my foot in the door, I guess.
Dino, were you a violin playing Ewok in your youth?
I was an aspiring Ewok, but I didn't play violin. I started as a guitar player, and I also went to USC, because there's a big thing here on this panel. But I was in the guitar program there, and I had aspirations to be a jazz guitar player. And then I decided that wasn't maybe my strongest suit, and I really fell in love with doing R&B. And from there I did R&B stuff, and then became a rock guitar player, and sort of, I think that experience, having to kind of shift gears all the time and doing whatever work was available when I was younger, was really valuable for my work as a composer, because you're kind of, and I spent a lot of time touring when I was younger too, and I think one of the things about that is you're constantly working under adverse conditions. And that happens a lot when you're composing. There's a lot of pressures that come in that you didn't expect. So you have to kind of figure out, you know, if you know something has to be in by 10 a.m. the next morning, and something breaks, or something's not working, or whatever, you know, it's having that experience of those adverse conditions kind of informs the way you look at stuff. But I actually, yeah, I started doing a music library, and I started doing spots, and I had been doing a lot of stuff for MTV, things here and there for different shows, and I worked as a music producer on a show called Taking the Stage. And the music supervisor from that show ended up being the music supervisor on Teen Wolf, and that was how I originally got the call for Teen Wolf.
How did you feel confident enough to take on something like Teen Wolf? And
I absolutely didn't. I never say no. If I think it's something that I can figure out how to do later, I'll just say yes.
Does that mean you're playing a lot of the music on Teen Wolf? Is that?
Yeah, pretty much. There were some, we hired strings for a few things, but yeah, pretty much everything I'm playing.
Very cool. And Kevin, I had a question for you. When you're approaching a new project, because you've done genres across the board and all sorts of different video games and TV, how does your process begin in trying to find the creative way to do things when you know there's also going to be constraints on what you're allowed to do? Because this isn't like John Williams is going to sit in his mansion for 8 months and write triads until he figures it out. You have a time limit.
Yeah, I always, I like to take the director and the producer's vision, and I don't want to be the guy who walks in the room and like, before anyone says anything, I'm like, I know what I'm going to do, or I have the vision. Really, our job, all of us, is to sit in a room with producers, directors, creators, and to take their words and turn that into something you can hear. And every project is really different, and you're working with different people's personalities. You've got people who have like, you know, you walk in and they show you something and it's already got music in it, and you're like, what's that? And they're like, this is music. But what I'm telling you guys, it's called temp music, which is temporary music. And it is. It's like John Williams, or it's Hans Zimmer, or it's you're listening to music that's already been put to the thing that you have to write music for. And it's a very daunting thing, because it's like, do you want me to copy this? Do you want me to do something creative? Do you want me to emulate it? Do you want me to be inspired by it? That hasn't happened to me too much because I'm working in animation, and they don't have time to mess around like that. Animation, they don't have time to think too hard about things, because they literally have to pump these episodes out so quick. So when I get an episode of like Ultimate Spider-Man or Invader Zim, it is silent. And I have to tell you, when you walk in for your first meeting and you're watching a silent 22 minutes with only dialogue, there's no sound effects, there's nothing. You're like, and at the end of it, you've written all these notes, and it's a terrifying ride home in the car. You're like, what am I going to do? And it's like, how many minutes of music do I have to write a day? You start figuring it out. It's like, okay, if they want this in a week, that means I have to write like 7 or 8 minutes of music a day, and that's very daunting. But that's exciting. That's kind of, you know, you wonder what motivates us sometimes when we're sitting in our bedrooms or in our studios, and no one's around telling us what to do. But that's what's great about being a composer. But also what gives us that drive is the fact that we have to produce. Yeah, it's fear. It's fear, but also the love of what we do.
Jay, before the panel we were talking about the first time you got an episode of a show about Legos fighting, and how difficult that might be to take seriously in the beginning, but you really found yourself invested. Can you talk about you know, just having that project for the first time, being like, maybe this is something amazing that I can do amazing things with?
It's true. I mean, it's the first original series that Lego has ever developed, and I gotta be honest, you know, when my partner, Mike Kramer, who couldn't be here today, but we do everything 50-50, all the writing, all the production, everything. When we first sat down with the first episode, I must be honest, we didn't quite take it seriously. We're like, they're little cute Legos, and they don't even have hands, just those semicircular. They're so authentic, like their joints are the mechanical ones of the, I mean, like they're Legos that are just animated, and they want to be ninjas, and they're pretty darn good at it. And so, like, how are we going to possibly do this? And you know, we were like, okay, if we don't take this seriously, nobody's going to take it seriously. And why would we want to create another just ADD, fluffy, bouncing off the walls show for kids? I mean, they have enough stuff like that as it is. So we're like, okay, what would it sound like if we did take it seriously? You know, what would it take to have kids all over the world take this seriously? So, you know, we really wanted to ground it in, I guess, emotional reality. Why is sci-fi fantasy, you know, the superhero genre making such a big comeback, and why is it sticking with not just fans like you guys, but everybody? You know, the nerds and the jocks and everybody in between, they all love The Dark Knight. Why? Because of the emotional resonance. I mean, it strikes right to the heart of our humanity. And that's why people like J.J. Abrams, Joss Whedon, and Christopher Nolan, like, they transcend genre, because it's about the humanity. You know, I was talking to Max, he's a film critic. I mean, why do film critics love movies? Because they care about the characters. And he said, okay, what would this sound like if there were characters that we really, really did genuinely care about? So, rather than approaching it in an ADD sort of way, we're like, okay, let's approach this like a Last Samurai, like a Battlestar Galactica, like the Lord of the Rings, like Kung Fu Panda, like a superhero thing almost. And because we want to just people to genuinely care about the characters. And how do you do that? You do that first and foremost with melody. You know, melody. They said that melody died in about 2001 with American Beauty and the whole Thomas Newman movie sort of stuff. I mean, that was perfect for that film, but I mean, we have an opportunity, especially, you know, the few of us, you know, we do a lot of stuff for kids. You know, the new generations coming into this world all the time, and I think it's a great opportunity and a privilege for all of us to indoctrinate kids with this love for melody, melody that means something, melody that makes you feel for the people. You know, even if you're doing something else while you're watching television and stuff, you hear a melody enough times and you remember it, and it sticks in your heart. And you know, it's a great privilege to be able to do that.
Amen. I thought about all of you with this question, but Fred, maybe I'll ask you specifically. Many of the films and TV shows that you guys have worked on have been had pre-existing iterations. You know, you're tackling Green Lantern, which came out, I think, after the movie ended up. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
So what is it like kind of taking on something that's been pre-established and trying to innovate and maybe also call back to that?
Well, the big thing they told me right off the bat when I started working on the show was that they did not want this to be related to the movie at all. Why? We didn't really discuss it further, and I didn't want to ask why. But it was pretty clear that they said this is not the Hal Jordan that was portrayed in the movie. He's a completely different character. He's a lot more cocky. He's a lot more confident, which Ryan Reynolds wouldn't be wrong with that much in his feature film. And the story takes place pretty much to 90% in outer space. So it's a complete sci-fi story as opposed to the movie, which was more of an Earth-based thing. So the whole thing is just, it's a different place, it's a different character, all the side characters are different, except for a few things, a few overlapping ones like Kilowog and Sinestro is now coming in season 2 also, but mostly it's a complete new set of characters, even some original ones that have never been used in the Green Lantern material before, like the robot Aya and Razor, and those characters which have a very, very large role in the whole story arc. So they really wanted it to be its own thing, and they said, just don't even listen to the movie, don't watch it. It has not, although I had seen it of course, but they didn't want to reference that in any way at all. They wanted to do their own thing, their own theme, and basically start fresh.
So where do you end up taking your inspiration from?
Well, you know, that's a tough question. I don't really know where it came from. I guess it just came from the many conversations I had with Bruce Timm, the producer, and John Carlo, the other producer on the show. Because we really spent a lot of time just discussing it and watching it and just coming up with ideas on what instruments might be good to use. And it was clear that they wanted something fairly orchestral, so that was kind of a given. And they wanted the sci-fi element to be implemented heavily into this shoot.
So you and an orchestra have like 8 weeks to record this now?
No, of course not. It's a 2-week turnaround per episode, and there's no live orchestra, just, you know, a few musicians per episode for that. So it requires a lot of production just to make it sound as good as it can be with the means given, basically.
And Dino, I'm wondering, you know, I don't think this new Teen Wolf is too connected to the previous Teen Wolf. You didn't have to worry about that. Yeah. But I mean, it is informed by other properties, other genres, kind of this vibe that we've gotten in the past few years. Where did you begin crafting Teen Wolf for this new generation, this new spin?
My first conversation with Jeff Davis, the executive producer, was we just talked about composers that we liked, and he's a big film music fan, and Jeff really likes a lot of the composers of like the late 80s, early 90s. He loves John Williams. A lot of, like, you know, there are certain John Williams movies he constantly references. I didn't want to do anything really like that on this show because I didn't think that that music really had anything to do with the generation of people who were watching it, and just in terms of my own taste, I just didn't want to do that, and so what I tried to do was take sort of the words that Jeff Davis uses a lot when he's giving me notes are make it bigger or more epic. So there's pretty much, there's no way to make it too big on our show. So I kind of try to take some of the, you know, the sort of the bigness of some of those classic film scores, but put it in what to me is more of a modern context or something that fits my aesthetic more. What kind of instruments are you using or sounds to do that? I mean, I feel like getting the note, make it big, can often lead to like the Well, I think one of the things, and I'm sure that you've had this experience as well, I think one of the things that was good about doing a lot of ads is that you kind of have to figure out, you have to learn how to figure out when somebody says, I want it to be more big, or I want it to sound like the idea of rain, or, you know, the latest note ever. Yeah, I mean, you have to kind of, I think one thing that I think that we all probably deal with is, you know, having to try to develop a language with your producer, director, or the client, and understand what they mean when they say big, or when they say faster. Most of the time it doesn't mean faster, it means more subdivided, or more percussion, or, you know, busier. But developing that language with the people you work with. And also, and again, this came from my background of working in record production, doing that without making somebody feel stupid. Because I think what I learned was that 90% of the time, whatever that person was hearing in their head was actually brilliant. But the way they were expressing it sounded horrible. So, you know, rather than going, you know, that's a really dumb idea, kind of trying to figure out, okay, when you say, you know, okay, I'm running in the forest and I trip over a log, now look down at your leg and it's bleeding, what does that sound like? You know, rather than saying, you know, I'm going to call your doctor, you know, kind of learning what that really means, and kind of respecting that person's idea, whatever it is, and trying to help get to that.
Will, I'm kind of curious about the scores that you've created, this kind of ethereal sound, and what indie films might actually afford you that, you know, the hustle and bustle of doing a TV show might not. Do you feel like you've gotten to really experiment with lots of different instruments and sounds to kind of craft the soundscapes you've created? Yeah,
definitely. I feel like I get very inspired by textures and by, you know, choices of instrumentation. I'm also kind of obsessed with themes. Sounds like you are as well. That to me, like the choices of instrumentation tend to kind of lead to thematic choices, and I try to have every score be based on a new instrument. Like I'll go out and source or learn to play a new instrument and kind of base a score around that. You know, there's a certain store in New York where I always go in there. There's this crazy, cranky old dude with a beard who like hates me. So I go in there and buy an instrument and learn to play it, and that will be like the kind of the basis of a score. A lot of the movies that I work on don't have huge orchestral budget, so I'll work a lot with a quartet, and I have quite a large space in Brooklyn, and I'm able to like get the quartet, move the mics around the room, and kind of blag it to sound like it's a, you know, a larger orchestra, which is, you know, something I've got quite good at doing, I think, like making it sound like a kind of larger thing than it really is. But yeah, I feel like it's all, a lot of the more recent scores that I've done have been really sort of sound driven, and, you know, the sort of fusion of synths being played through amps with like organic instrumentation, and it's kind of where I'm at, I guess.
You know, I feel like a few years ago, even, that a lot of the scores I was hearing on TV and even movies were kind of being processed out of machines. And more of the composers I talk to, it seems like we get to actually play instruments now. People are giving us a chance to do this, to be innovative. Is that really how innovation is happening in this kind of smaller scale composition world? And what kind of instruments are people using to continue to innovate on that platform? I know you're using a lot of them. Don't even try and skirt around this one.
Well, yeah. So for those of you who are, I guess, wondering about this, it is true. You know, budgets are getting smaller. Things are getting much more, you know, I guess, specialized and much more independent. I mean, gone are the days where every TV show gets a session with a 40-piece orchestra every week, like in the 70s. You know, those were the glory days. But now we got to do something different. So just, I mean, all of these guys, I'm sure, you know, play a lot of instruments. It's kind of the composer's thing. And also I'm sure everybody is, you know, a really good producer, you know, has people work for them that are very good producers. And so, you know, like Freddie said that, you know, it's largely orchestral score. That's what his producers wanted. But, you know, they can't afford that. And so he has to create it all in the box, as they say, which is using real instrument samples, but a, you know, artificial performance. You trigger on your keyboard, that whole thing. But what it gives us an opportunity to do is, feature more solo instruments. If everything's in the box, it has a tendency to sound a little bit non-human, and then you lose a little bit of the emotional connection to the material. And so that's why, Dino plays a lot of guitar. Freddie has some soloists and stuff. What we do with Ninjago is the whole palette is pretty much just folk music from around the world. So, if you, by the way, Freddie taught at USC. I'm kind of outing him. Freddie was my teacher at USC, and what they always taught us was, if you could have just one live person playing at all times, that kind of sells it, and then the imagination can sort of do the rest. And so we always want to find, solo instruments that will evoke a certain time, a certain place, a certain mood. And so we've, and Kramer, my partner, he's one of those guys that just, goes into the old stores and buys the instruments and stuff. I was in Tokyo, and I went and bought him a shakuhachi. He's got a whole bunch of duduks. He's got, zonghu from China, and everything in between. We do a lot of vocals. We make up our own languages, and we sing them. We did a lot of, you guys have seen the pirate episodes, but that's us doing a little pirate shanty. But yeah, and so I think that, like we were talking about before, like really emphasizing a strong sense of melody and a sense of, humanity in the midst of all this stuff going on. In order, I actually kind of like the fact that we're using more soloists. It's that whole kind of individual voice that can evoke a character and it can evoke a kind of time and place. And so, a lot of us play it ourselves. Some of us hire friends, or even the professionals that we can have the budget for it. But I think solos are kind of where it's at now. And for now, it works. And I can't wait to see kind of what comes out of this.
Kevin, I was thinking about you. Video games over the years have become more and more cinematic, and I'm wondering if the demands for the types of scores that you're crafting for them have changed too. What was your experience working on video games apart from TV and film?
I always liken the way producers want video games to sound is like they want it to be basically like a huge, $50 million budget film. It seems like you're either writing an ambient track or the hugest boss battle ever. And so when I write game music, I kind of put that hat on, and I write just big, huge, epic boss music. And sometimes, one project I did, the Tron Evolution game, I got to write a bunch of ambient, trippy kind of electronic-y kind of stuff, and it was so fun. I was like almost putting myself in a trance while I was writing the music, and I was so mellow during those few weeks. I don't know if you guys get this way, but when you're like scoring people getting murdered and stuff, it's kind of starts to the kind of music you write can affect your composer a little bit. So I'm happy to be writing kids animation because I have 3 kids right now. So
that's great. I guess I should open up for questions. Does anyone have a question for right here?
So for any kids who are like just making movies and putting them up on YouTube, what advice would you have for scoring their own stuff if they don't have access to a quartet or a studio? How could they go about learning how to do that?
And the question was about budding filmmakers scoring their own pieces and throwing them online. What should they do?
I think the most important thing is to develop relationships. Filmmaking is a team sport. It always has been. It always should be. And so I think, not to throw quality of art under the bus, but I think if you're first starting out, it's not as important when you're a 14-year-old kid that just got his first digital camera and his first sequencer for music. It's not as important that it be the best work of art ever, because there will be more. If they love it, if they're going to stick to it. The most important thing is they create something that's authentic and they learn something about the process. And so I would say, go into your school hallway and find a kid that carries around a guitar and say, hey, tell me about your music, tell me about your personality, let's work together. So they go to each other's houses, they have jam sessions and stuff, and even if it's just recorded on an iPhone this guitar score that could sound horrible on YouTube, you know, it could get a lot of thumbs down, but who cares? Because those kids have learned to trust each other, learned to like each other, and then 3 years later when that guitar player gets really, really good, he learns a little bit about Mozart and Stravinsky and starts budding his orchestral chops and learns more about sound production and stuff. Those kids, because they were in the trenches together when nobody believed in them, all of a sudden that relationship is developing into something really beautiful and something really artistically strong. And then next time it's going to get much more thumbs up. So I would say relationships from the very beginning are key, even if the quality isn't as good. I mean, it's all about learning and making things better.
Making some terrible music, vital to making good music. I've also been reminded that we're giving away cool swag to people who ask questions, just in case. You get swag.
How would you define these three events like Legos and Green Lantern? How would you create a theme for these characters that these traits to fit into the world?
He asked about creating themes for these specific characters that would continue to be used in the world. Brand new themes.
Brand new themes. How do you come up with a good theme that fits the character? Right. Well, it really emerges out of the character that they have created. You know, that obviously that comes first. They have the character arc. I generally know where that character is heading over the course of the season, and based on that, I basically design a theme that I believe will work in all those scenarios and possibly can develop and transform into something completely different by the end, depending on how the characters develop. In Green Lantern, the perfect example is Aya, which started off with just a very brief 4-note motive when they first meet her in the Interceptor, and it's towards the end of season 1 it becomes a lot more fleshed out because this whole Razor relationship is sort of growing. And then in season 2 you'll see that there's a whole bunch of new developments with that theme happening also. So it's really about starting off in the right place, which is a really hard thing to do, but you just have to try a few things and then just roll with it. And then usually it just kind of happens and it emerges out of that alongside the other characters as well.
Lightsaber in the back. Is it a classical or jazz background, or music education, I suppose? You go back to
yes.
But are you recalling the fundamentals of the music that you learn? I mean, the things that aren't music or movie music, are you bringing back into?
I think you have to learn it in order to forget it.
I mean, in my case specifically, I have learned counterpoint, I've learned traditional harmony, I've played classical violin, and I've learned also jazz quite a fair amount because I've played jazz guitar for a number of years. And honestly, the thing that stuck with me the most for my writing process is jazz harmony. I don't really think about anything else besides Roman numerals when I'm writing the music. It's really weird. I don't know, for some reason, jazz harmony made the most sense to me in terms of harmony studies. And so that's really what I'm thinking about the most, but that's just me. I'm sure everybody has got their own method of writing.
It's a tool, nothing more. I mean, if something breaks in your house, you're like, do I have a power drill? Yes or no? You know, that will determine how the rest of your day goes. So it's like, you know, you get a scoring gig and they want something to sound like John Barry. It's like, do I know John Barry harmony? Do I know how to orchestrate strings? Yes or no? And that will determine the rest of your day. You look fantastic, by the way.
How about this gentleman right here? Yes, you.
What happens if something you write for, let's say, film A, and something like a motive a little seeps in film B? How do you handle that? Is an issue like with the producers ever like
when you start cribbing from yourself?
Yeah, like, you know, like
I mean, that's a fair thing. I mean, when you start doing a lot of work, do you end up replicating things you've done in the past?
I think that you can. There are ways of avoiding that. One thing that I've come across quite a lot lately is we were talking earlier about temp scores and like how a filmmaker will put like, you know, famous cues in the movie to sort of guide the composer as to what they want. Something that's been happening recently with my stuff is that they've been putting my work from other movies in as temp scores, which is actually kind of awful. And it's sort of like, I've done that already, and that was for something else. And these are kind of, you know, you definitely have like go-to things that's your thing, and it's kind of like trying to do that, reinvent it in a different way is like a real challenge. But you know, for me, I guess like that idea of the identity of a movie being very, you know, individual is kind of like the thing that dictates it not being the same as the last one.
Yes, you.
What kind of technical tools do you use to compose? Do you use certain softwares that...
Sure.
What kind of tools do you use to create the music that you make?
Well, we all probably use similar tools. I mean, you have a DAW, D-A-W, like Pro Tools or Live or whatever.
Dog.
Or you can have a dog. Yeah, and then everybody will have different ways of inputting. You have your kind of your go-to sounds, your library of sounds, maybe for orchestral stuff, and then everybody will usually have, you know, like I have kind of a bunch of custom samples that I've made for particular projects, and we were talking about, I think, one way that to avoid repeating yourself is to kind of constantly have a new set of sounds that you use for different projects, and it kind of will help focus you. And, yeah.
Where does the dog go when you're done? This gentleman in the back, glasses, closely.
Has anyone ever had a director fixate on temp score to the point where he was kind of asking you to copy it? And how do you negotiate that diplomatically?
Fixating on temp scores. They want it. Is that the industry term? Templo?
Yes.
Have you ever, has anyone had that experience, or the horror stories? I really
I wrote the main title theme song for Johnny Test, for the American version at least, for season 1, and I won't say the name of the band, but there was a certain song of a certain band that they just really, really liked, and so that was, it wasn't like we were expected to copy it, but it was, we just knew that it had to be similar. So that's a really tough spot to be in, because, I mean, it's kind of cool because at least you know what you need to do, but you really have to be careful, because the last thing you want is to be sued by, you know, some huge famous band. And our contracts, you have to be really careful with your contracts, that they will hold you, you know, some of them, it's up to you to make sure that you're not infringing on any copyright. So we have to be really careful when we're writing our melodies and producing things, that it's not, you know, can't be, you know, there's all these technical rules, but it kind of gets into that.
I will say though that in the genre of animation, ever since the very beginning with the Chuck Jones Looney Tunes, I mean, sound-alikes and using very famous pieces of music to evoke a certain, or to parody a certain, you know, thing that's going on with the characters and with the situation, you know. The Coyote and the Roadrunner and stuff, or the Barber of Seville with Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd when he shaves him and everything. You know, sound-alikes are a part of the animation universe. They always have been, they always will be, and I like that. And so, so those of us who work in animation, you know, we will get a legitimate note from a director that says, okay, we want you to do something that sounds as much like this as you can without getting sued, because we want to intentionally evoke something from the past, like a pastiche. You know, it's not just a postmodern thing, it's been in animation ever since the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And so, for instance, for an episode of Ninjago, they like did a shot-for-shot remake of the beginning of Apocalypse Now with the ceiling fans, and it was fantastic. It was a gift for the parents. And so they say, we want you to do a sound-alike of the Doors. Yes! So we did the whole Doors thing, and you change around a couple notes so you don't get sued, and then you just lay in the Ninjago theme on the cheesy 60s organ on the top, and then you've made your own. I love doing something.
All the way in the back, blue hair.
You mentioned that relationships are crucial to being successful in this industry, but have you ever had an encounter where your creative composition conflicted with the original ideas?
What? Come again?
Have you ever had an composition conflicted with the ideas that the people that you're working with presented to you first?
The filmmakers, the producers come to you with an idea, you deliver, it's not exactly what they were looking for.
Never.
The advantage of indie film, they just want something. Have you guys ever had that problem? Or is the discussion so long that like you talk so much first that by the time you're actually writing it, that's not an issue?
No, sometimes. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say sometimes. I mean, sometimes the director producer may change their mind by the time you get around to scoring a scene, or it could just be a couple days later, and then sometimes something's been cut in a way that they want to that the idea has changed, and sometimes you just get notes like it may have worked, but just not worked in the way that there's more than one way to score a scene.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say this happens all the time, especially once you're working on projects of a bigger scale where there's more people involved. You have studio executives, you have directors, you have another production company that may be involved also, and more often you start working with one person, mostly the director, and you're heading down this one road and everything is going very well. And then halfway through this 90-minute score, the studio hears it for the first time, and suddenly they think it should be completely different. And
how many all-nighters have you pulled?
Yeah, well, that's exactly where that starts. And you just have to find getting frustrated and depressed about that sort of thing is really the wrong thing to do in this industry, because it happens all the time, and you just have to find ways to adjust to it and make them feel comfortable that you can adjust to that and that you can make everybody happy and get everybody to the same page. And it's often very challenging because people, have very strong opinions about what they want.
You, sir, right there. Yes.
You kind of touched on this earlier, but I was curious if there are certain things in animation that you can or cannot do in relation to live action. Like, are you sort of pressured to go a little broader, or free to go a little broader? Is there any real difference at all?
What does animation afford you that live action does not? Or what does it not?
I was just going to say real quick, it's way more broader. Like, I watch films and everything is so subtle with especially emotional kind of things, but in animation you're just free to just hit it bigger and more bolder. And I feel like I'm so happy to be scoring animation because I get to write huge music, just like those big, huge boss battles I was talking about. You can write really big music and really dramatic music that if I was scoring CSI Miami, I have to do subtle little loopy things and stuff like that. I can't do cool, huge, big orchestral punk rock inspired, monster mash pieces. So.
I would say also in animation, the sheer volume of music is much larger. I mean, in film or in television, the music starts at the main title and it stops at the main credits, and it pretty much never takes a break. And so it affords you an opportunity, like my man over here said, to be much bolder, but also to create a much thorough, a through line. It's like it's kind of like you're the roller coaster, and then the characters and everything like that, and the special effects are more like the monsters you see to the left or to the right or up ahead, but you're the roller coaster itself. And I think sometimes with live action and different genres of film, it's the opposite.
Right here. No, the little line. But then you.
For game composing, I feel like to some extent you have to think about the fact that it's going to be very repetitive and has to be kind of pleasant. Like you're going to want to stay in that environment for a long time. How do you think that limits your composing, or how do you work with that within writing?
Yeah, the game music loops, and so I always get to have those producers give me. Hopefully, I can write at least a 2 to 2.5 minute piece that will loop. I purposely write the music so that it changes more throughout that 2.5 minutes, because there's no sense in repeating your A section verbatim within the 2.5 minutes, because it's going to loop. So that going in, so you really fill up that 2.5 minutes or that minute or minute and a half with as much unique material without it sounding like you're crazy and your brain's here and then it's going there. You want it to be still a nice cohesive piece of music. But yes, definitely keep that in mind, and you hope the player doesn't having trouble in that one spot and is stuck there for 4 hours. Because if he is, I hope they mute it. But yeah, I always wonder, like, why do people buy like soundtracks for game music? I mean, it'd be great if they would, but like, haven't you heard my music enough? You really want it on CD?
I owe you one question.
I'm curious that from doing all this new writing that you're doing, that the music seems to take on a life of its own from the gaming that you've done, because now you have orchestra tours that the music from scores and stuff are now no longer sort of just totally embedded into the picture. And, how does that?
People are finally accepting TV, film, small film, and gaming scores. As you said, they're putting them out on CDs. What is that experience like? Do you see that changing? It seems like a sea change. I mean, didn't you just do an orchestra tour, or you're about to, for Green Lantern?
Oh yeah, we did a big concert in Spain with the orchestra and the choir for an animation concert in general that did all sorts of stuff, Justice League and Batman, the Johnny Walker material. Yeah, I think it's great that there's an interest for that music. I mean, it really is.
Where's the demand coming from? How did it change? I mean, do you see more people getting into what you do because of the internet, or because are you connecting?
I'm sure the internet helps a great deal just for people to get access to this stuff. Because usually, when the internet wasn't there, people had to go to a store and find out if the CD is available or not. Now you can basically get anything you want on iTunes or Spotify, and you can get access. You can have access to it, and I think that just gives it more access to so many more people that would really want it. I think it's fantastic. There's a high demand.
Great. That's about it. I think we're out of time, so thank you guys very much. Obviously, it's on television and video games, so check them out. Thanks, guys. Swag.
Is there a society? It's not like there's no three. There's like musicians.